All right, so I've got Eugene's seated female nude. This is in no way sexualizing the female form. I think that drawing the female form or any anatomically correct form is like the quintessential like learning thing. And it's done the same exact way we've done our stupid still lives. Locking everything in, simple shapes, dumbing as much down as possible, drawing one thing and measuring off of that. I'm going to go from the top of the head to the bottom of the ponytail. Once I do that, it's all kind of cake from there. I'm just measuring, x-axis, y-axis, a bunch of pilot lines, and then a few more pilot lines. And we'll end up at this by the end of the day, looking for large shapes, looking for rhythms. None of this should sound too foreign language to you. If it is foreign language, hey, Mr. Ball, we should probably talk about this. And I will say, maybe after school tomorrow, because we've got meetings today. All right, first thing I'm gonna do is the top of her head. I'm gonna add a little bit of space. This is the bottom of her ponytail, right there. So I got x-axis, x-axis. Same exact thing that I did with my apple. For whatever reason, I drew at a diagonal. I need to figure out the farthest west side of her head. That looks good. Farthest east side, measuring a little bit. How many of this distance do I have here to here? It's a little less than that. Ballpark. It's not a perfect square. It's more of a rectangle. So from the bottom of the ponytail here, top of the head here, outside of the head. This is not the outside of the ponytail. This is the outside of the cranium. And I'll zoom in a little bit for you guys here. I've got a little bit of the neck that comes down to get the shape of my head, round it off a little bit, round it off a little bit. I don't really need to worry too much about that side. All right, once we have this mannequinized head in here, we say mannequinized, think of it like an artist mannequin or Old Navy mannequins, like those faceless, creepy ones. Now I can do everything from that. I'm going to use a lot of the negative space to draw. I'm going to use a lot of my y-axis to draw. I'm going to use a lot of my x-axis to get into proportion. Carter here. Oh, you just moved. All right. Sit back from your picture too. Avoid erasing too much. Which one do you want to use? No. If you want to edit her into a mono, she's a sepia colored right now. It's basically black and white, but if you want to edit it, go for it. All right. I've got my x-axis, top of the head, bottom of the ponytail. A little bit below that, I'm going to have kind of a z-axis for her shoulders. It's not too far below, but z-axis. This is going to be my axis from my shoulders. Ran past first base. I know that she's not wearing shoulder pads. She's not buff. Average. Okay. To get my shoulders now, I've got my neck, bottom. So I should probably bring that up a little bit. I'm going to look at my negative space, namely this backwards L, how it rounds off, kind of S curves a little bit, and comes out this way. from this point to this point of her shoulder, I need to figure out how long that goes. And I can use my negative space. I know that that's way too long. If I keep coming this way, that's way too short. So it needs to be somewhere in here. I can use the length of my head though, from top to bottom, from here to here, to find my y-axis. So it is just about a little bit more than half of my head, about this distance. Now I can have my shoulder. This is the shoulder. This is another thing that I got into with the last class. Try not to think of this as like I'm drawing a seated female. I'm just drawing this abstract shape. If I zoom in that much, it's pretty abstract. But as long as I have a measuring point from here to here, here to here, I have something to go off of. Don't get into your own head. Don't psych yourself out too much. This is a difficult drawing. This is more difficult than the Vanita's drawing because we have a seated female, a live model. Yep. Yep. But if you drew large, then you don't have to draw as much. That's the thing. Okay. Your shoulder is nowhere near as far out as it needs to be in comparison. Okay. So we said that as long as you get it in proportion, who cares? You've got the idea. Okay. I told you that from day one. The bigger you draw, the less you have to draw. Me too. All right. Just make sure that you're in proportion. Right now, she looks like one of the me's, those we characters. All right. Then she has a little bit of trap muscle. I'm looking at the edge of her head here, this angle, and this will become the other shoulder. And it's a little difficult to see on the Elmo. So looking at negative space here, not focusing at all on the side of the face. This negative space here, this shape. It's a lot easier to draw that shape than it is to draw faces and shoulders. We've already got our foundation. I know that my face is going to have to come out a little bit further. Not much, just the hair. You've diagnosed your problem. Take a bit off the top. All right. Armpits. Working our way down. From the top of my arm here, my armpit to this point, I've got distance. I've got a little bit of space. How many of that can I fit in my head? About half the head. So from that point at that change in direction, half the head. Arm looks a little thick, but once we tailor it a little bit, it's not going to be too bad. You can also find a rhythm, S-curves, so from the edge of her neck here, comes down. Bring it out just a little bit. I've got my point here that I'm relatively happy with. It doesn't come outside of her cranium, just y-axis, use a bunch of different points. Comes a little bit outside. Yeah. All right. My diagonal here is very similar to the diagonal of my shoulders. So from that point to this point over here, it's going to fall along that z-axis. I don't have a whole lot of stuff to measure off of here. Yeah. Or other armpit, the point. So I'm focusing on this point here and the point here. We're not going to draw this entire arm. I need to see how many of those heads can I fit from that point of my armpit down here to my point of my armpit up here. Remember, this is a little bit up from the other one. Maybe not that high. So one head. A little bit more than a head. So that's a head, a little bit more than a head. Somewhere around here. You can use a rhythm line from this axis here. That creates a little bit of an oval shape. If I keep that going, change my angle a little bit, change my arch a little bit, I'll get into the ballpark. So a little bit more than a head, maybe a head and a quarter. About a head below my original line here. That is where, a little bit below that, that's where the breast is going to be. And I'm just going to have x-axis for my breast. And I can work on that angle as it comes down. Avoid erasing too much. We need to be able to see a lot of our mistakes right now. Like that. And I can see that in my reference from here to the bottom of the breast to the change in the torso, it's about the same distance. Maybe a little bit more here from this point to this point. This is where it's going to change directions again. Angles, and eventually that's going to arch over for her gut. To finish that, I'm going to use my negative space. I'm going to draw this wedge, this knife-looking shape. Try and get that diagonal in here. Run past first base, give yourself a lot of options. And it takes a little bit to warm up too, so we'll end up coming back to this and changing things up a bit. So get that angle in there. I've got a little bit of angle for the inside of my arm. I know that it's not straight down. I know that it's not a 45. It's keeps rocking a little bit further this way. And I can wait until I have this line in there to do the rest of my stuff. Zach, just try and get caught up. I am recording this, so if you need to watch it afterwards, you can watch it afterwards. All right. Making sure that I don't have a whole lot of space here. The angle of my breast just a little bit. All right. I'll come back to this point in just a sec, yeah. It's all relative to whatever you drew first. All right, I'm gonna move to fill in her back. I know that her spine is right here. And drawing in this kind of articulated stick figure, that's the same way as us drawing in boxes first for a cube or circles for the apple, inside out. I've got a really broad arch from here down. If I go really wide, she's a lot bigger in my drawing than the reference. I want to keep it true to form, true to the reference. So I'm going to bring that line in a bit and keep looking at my reference. You know that if I get to here, she's way too thin. She's emaciated, but she's somewhere in this range. And I can also measure from this point on her gut to the back of her, this contour of her back. I know that I have about the width of the head. So I'm a lot more comfortable here than I was out here. Make sure that you can see your mistakes before you erase them. And your lines will get a little bit darker as they get a little bit more right, a little bit more correct. And again, running past first base, I'm not sure where that's going to stop just yet. Shrink the arm in just a little bit. A lot of these will get tailored. A lot of these lines and shadows and shapes will get tailored a little bit more as we get into our details. We're focusing on ballpark. All right, this arm, I know that where my shoulder line here and my armpit line were parallel. I've got another point for my armpit. I'm just going to focus on that angle, comes down a little bit past an X angle or X axis. Run past first. Okay. Parallel line coming up. Towards my shoulder. This distance and this distance, relatively similar. It tapers off here a bit because we have the shoulder, but we can draw that in after. Simplified shapes. Went way past my elbow over here. Who cares? We're going to have a y-axis to determine that anyway. Measuring from my angle here, my point of intersection on my reference to the edge of my elbow, shows me that I have about a head and a quarter. So that distance, somewhere around here. Width of my head, the length of my head, and a quarter of that. Y-axis, yay. So my elbow is going to be somewhere out here. And I can tailor that shape a little bit. Start coming in. I'm going to avoid doing the shoulder here because we're going to use this angle to do that. This line from the point in her armpit to the edge of her elbow here. Right now we've got this kind of bulgy line arches up a little bit because as she's seated on the chair, it's pushing her arm flab up. And there's an intersecting line there from here to here. There's this intersecting line that's a little bit left of center. So I've got there to there. This is center, just a hair left. That's where the chair is going to come out. Now I need to figure out, I'm going to go a little further. I'm just going to go into the center. This rhythm, it comes out from here, looking at that diagonal. This rhythm, if that kept going, that's going to become her shoulder on this side. So finding rhythms becomes important to me figuring out this shoulder. This broad line, if this kept going here and out, and I know that that line isn't going to come to this y-axis. So eventually it's going to start changing direction. Where? I don't know yet. We'll piece it together. So now I have my shoulder, tricep, elbow. Forearm is just a line that comes from my elbow there. If at any point you feel like you're in a good spot and you can erase some things, do so. Just because I recommend not erasing does not mean don't erase. If this dictation is too slow, then you're drawing it wrong. Look at your reference. Stop looking at my picture. So if you feel like she has really broad shoulders, you either need to come in a little bit or you need to take the edge off the top. Don't give her shoulder pads. All right. I'm going to start using this x-axis at her torso where it changes directions. This is going to be my next easier thing to see. So from that x-axis straight across, got the edge of the back. I'm happy with that. I've got the angle. I'm happy with that. I need to figure out where her shoulder or her elbow is over here. In comparison to that, bottom of the elbow straight across is barely half of the head. That's going to be where her arm ends over here. I can keep dragging that down. Simple shape, blocks it out. And you can see just above that line, so this is her elbow here. Just above that is that fabric that goes from tricep to belly. And there's a little bit of belly. And we have a 45-degree angle here. Maybe a little bit more dramatic than 45. Give yourself some options. Run past first. And what we can do now is have this rhythm line come across. So that 45 eventually becomes this entire oval. So once we have that kind of memorized, we know that that oval is not going to come past here. I can drag that up. Know that that's going to be tailored a little bit. Big rhythm, big shape, big circle. Easy way to block it in. And I also have this rhythm here for this line coming down. This is basically going to be the edge of my white fabric here. So if I go straight up with that line that I have, that's curving in a little bit too dramatically. So if I go all the way down to that oval, now I have this point and this point, which is this point and this point. From that point to that point, how much of that is white? If this is my center line, or center of that point, it's just shy of center. So 1 point, 2 points, needs to be a little bit more dramatic ball. Here's center. That's going to be where my white fabric comes out. And this is going to create another really long oval that goes here. Comes up. So that white fabric looks a little diapery. Comes out from here, changes angles, basically at the spine. So the spine's going to be somewhere around here. That comes up. And that just keeps coming out. And I'm in the ballpark there. Might be a little low here. Eventually, we'll line that out a little bit for the changes in directions of the fabric. We're in a good spot here. I've got good there. Come back to finish this arm. This arm is pretty difficult with exception of her braided hair. This arm is probably the most difficult part of this drawing because it's got a pronounced but very not dramatic change in directions. Just above this. So if I kept that x-axis going just above it, this will change directions this way. It's pronounced, but it's a little funky. From my elbow to the bottom of my forearm, there's a very small distance, x-axis wise. Elbow rounds off. You can draw a circle for your elbow just so you can see it. This rhythm comes over. It's going to look weird as a line drawing because there's a lot of foreshortening, meaning her arm is going into the background. As far as from this point on her bicep to here, I'm just looking at the negative space. There's a lot of unclear information in my picture. Got a little bit of space here. her hand, the top of her hand, back of her palm, lines up with the elbow, or the elbow. So again, negative space here to here and up. So here to here and up. Ballpark. It's not very long for her hand. She doesn't have massive hands. She's not Uma Thurman, who I'm told has large hands. It is just that. And from our elbow, we have another piece of fabric coming down that will eventually connect with this oval here. So I got a starting point, an ending point, put them together. Big oval now. You're not, well, you drew large, so you might not see all that. You might, let me see. Let me see. Don't try and shrink anything in. Your head's massive, like way too big. So instead of, put it down, John. Instead of changing all this, you know that you have this distance from these points. Figure out how much of that head you need to take off. So if your head is all the way up here, I've got 1 point and 2 points. Just map those out on your iPad and figure out how much of the head you need to take off so that it's proportionate. Okay, you know that you need to take off the sides and the top. I'd start by coming down and looking at my negative space here, get that backwards L in, and where those two lines connect, that's where you're gonna make your changes. Beginning artists tend to make bobblehead figures. That's fine. We know that that's not what people look like. Diagnose the problem and fix it. Last thing that I have is a diagonal that comes down out from my my hand here. So here's the edge of my hand. Comes out a little bit. And it's a little bit more of a dramatic angle than a 45. So somewhere like that. The back of my fabric is almost comes down straight. This is where you need to be for tomorrow. This is completely blocked in, relatively proportionate to my reference. Probably need to go out a little further with my arm here. A little bit more of a diagonal. The fabric is going to look funky. She's going to look a little funky. I think I need to take a little bit off the top of the head. But she's proportionate. So this is where you need to be for tomorrow. Part 2 of the Saatchi Gallery discussion is online. It is an actual discussion. Those of you drawing, lend me your ears for a moment. With the second part of your Saatchi Gallery, you have to go to your original worksheet that you did last week, pick your favorite, post that favorite one, discuss why you like it, just the picture, just whatever person did this, I liked it because of these reasons. Give me a little bit more than what you wrote in the, let me stop recording.